Hello, this is the Green Corn Rebellion Show. I'm Gregory Harden II. Today I'm here with Jon Siebels, the guitarist of the band Eve 6. How are you doing today?
Good, man. How's it going?
I'm good. All right, so first question I have is, where are you from and where did you grow up at?
I'm from Southern California. I grew up in a town called La Crescenta, which is really, it's only about 15 minutes north of downtown LA, but it's kind of like, suburbs in the hills. It's Glendale, basically, for anyone who's familiar with Southern California. It's like the hills above Glendale. So,
All right. What made you want to play guitar?
both of my parents are musicians, so I kind of like grew up just around music. My mom's a piano teacher. My dad plays piano and keyboards and does all kinds of stuff. But I grew up like taking. My mom used to teach like the Yamaha music program, which is kind of like Suzuki method or something. But so I grew up like taking those classes, and I never really fell in love with playing the piano. But I kind of got the sort of the basics of music through that. And then my dad used to have a little like studio in our house. Like one of the bedrooms was like his studio, and this was like late 80s, early 90s. So it was like reel-to-reel tape machines with like a computer chasing it with MIDI, and like just crazy. Like it's crazy how far it's come now. But so he had this little studio there, and he had a guitar sitting in there, and I was in about 5th or 6th grade and picked it up. He taught me how to play Wild Thing by the Trogs on the acoustic, like gut string acoustic, and it was like that was it, and I was off and running. And then I took some lessons. Like I wasn't like every week take a lesson type of thing. I would take a lesson here and there. There was one guy I would take from sort of regularly, and then every once in a while, like my dad would have one of his buddies like staying over. There was a guitar player or whatever, and they'd give me a lesson. But I was, I never got like super into like trying to be like a virtuoso guitar player. I just, I'm definitely more about like songs than I am about like look how fast I can play the guitar or anything like that. So.
All right. Who are some of your biggest musical influences?
I think, man, career artists, like if I just had to choose one artist, like that spans, good music through their entire career, Tom Petty and Heartbreakers. It's like, if you think about it, like, for so many decades, he made relevant records, and maybe not to you, but like this is old guy shit. But no, just the songwriting, the simplicity of the music, like like that to me is just as like song, just purely songwriting and the craft of writing a song. Like he's it for me. But I grew up in the 90s, so it was not only a lot of the like alternative stuff, like whatever, from your Nirvana to your even like the Melvins and L7 and shit like that. But then also I grew up in the 90s in Southern California, so for me it was like Bad Religion, Social Distortion. I liked a lot of the kind of like Northern California, like Lookout Records bands. The Mr. T Experience and the Queers and Screeching Weasels. Like me and Max, the singer of Eve 6, is like Screeching Weasels, like one of our all-time favorite bands. So yeah, a lot of the kind of like stuff that paved the way to pop punk, I guess,
Yeah. Oh, were you ever into the band Helmet?
Yeah, I liked Helmet. Actually, Max was a really big Helmet fan. But yeah, I definitely I loved all that kind of stuff.
All right. So what was it like whenever you guys first ever heard your songs on the radio?
I mean, it was weird. I remember the first time was it was, I guess, in '98, and so we had made the record. We basically graduated high school in whatever June of '97. Made the record that year, and it came out in April of the following year. So leading up to April was when they first started like working it to radio, and I remember some of my friends went to school at UCSB and in Santa Barbara, and they had played it on one of these like cage match, like new songs, like that kind of thing, and of course, because all my friends lived up there, it won that night, so we knew that it was going to be played the next night on their next night of the cage match or whatever. So we drove I drove my Ford Ranger truck like all the way up to just where we could get inside the zone of where the station was the next night and listen to it. So that was like the first time I heard it. But yeah, it was a trip, 18, 17, I guess. Yeah, I was 18 at that point. Yeah.
That's crazy. Let's see here. So you're a Bernie supporter.
Yes, sir.
I know that from your tweets, and you like my tweets a lot. So were you also a Bernie supporter in 2016 as well?
I was like a moderate Bernie supporter. It's really been in the last it's been since that election, I think, that I've always looked at myself as like ideologically, have always loved everything about Bernie, and I think that, before I really, and I would pay attention to politics, but I guess more on a mainstream level, and so I always kind of had that notion that it's like, well, that might, this is what I actually think the way it should be. But, it's got to be sort of this, incrementalism, like whatever, like things have to, even though I don't see myself in the center, like things have to be more in the center, in order to get shit done. And it's like the more that I really started to pay attention to, exactly how politics work, and started following, non-corporate news and listening to Democracy Now! And
Oh yeah.
The Young Turks early on, following what Justice Democrats were doing. It was around that time when I really started to go, oh, like this is super fucked up, and it just boiled down to me to the fact that I guess realizing that both sides are just so corrupt, I grew up in conservative home, I grew up not realizing that Ronald Reagan was an awful president, you know what I mean? Like I was young. And so I think, just being, thinking of myself as a quote unquote Democrat, as I became like a, teenager and young adult and stuff like that, that was radical in my mind, you know what I mean? From like how I grew up. And so the more that I really started to pay attention and look at the ways in which, Obama didn't really follow through on I think what everyone hoped he would, and things like that, and then just really going wow, okay, this whole system is just so corrupt on both sides. If you're, Republicans and Democrats to me are like Coke and Pepsi. Like, one might be a little sweeter, but they'll both kill you, basically, and so this idea of like where the money was coming from and who was controlling it, and just I think also, like, from the outside, I started to look around at our country, and it's like I travel a lot, and as I travel across the country, I'm like, wow, like there's another TGI Fridays, there's another, like, Home Depot, there's another, like, whatever, like just a strip mall full of the same 5 corporations, and as I started to really pay attention to that, I'm like, wow, this entire country is owned by like 4 companies, and so that sort of led me to be like, okay, well, if our entire and there's two telecommunications companies, and there's even in music, I mean, it went from being a plethora, or a good amount of major record labels to like 2, and so then I'm going like, okay, well, how is this happening? I like, I've always grown up like knowing about like antitrust laws and shit like that.
Yeah.
How, and so then I'm looking at it and I'm going like, all of this happened, this shit happened under Clinton, this shit happened under Bush, and it's like, it's just every step of the way, it just became more and more corrupt, and a few handful of people basically ended up controlling everything, and so I guess the really focusing on like the money in politics and the corruption of like, lobbyists and super PACs and all these different things, is what really, once I really started to focus on that, it was like that's when my politics really went all the way left, at least by, I guess, the United States standards. And I started watching Noam Chomsky videos and reading Howard Zinn, and like, what I mean? It's like, it's just, I just sort of, headed down that path. And it's like, that was always what my heart was, but it took me a minute to like figure out like where my place in that was, I guess,
That makes sense. So what's your favorite thing that you've done with Eve 6?
Oh man.
It could be a tour, it could just be an album or something of that nature. Yeah.
Man, I might have to think about that for a second. I mean, there's sort of been like 2 phases of Eve 6. There was we like first record in 98, second record 2000, third record 2003. Then everything collapsed. Like all the label, whatever, downloading started happening, and the labels all condensed, and we got dropped and whatever. So the band split up for a while. I was playing in another band, and then the Max, the singer and the drummer, had started doing some like shows and stuff like that, and I was kind of still off doing my other things. So it wasn't until 2010 that I rejoined the band. And then basically at this point, it's gotten to this point where I think we can, I don't know, like so much crazy shit happened like when we were so young and our brains were not fully developed, and so then you feel like, I don't know. It's like going back and looking at like your high school yearbook photo. Like, you're young, so they probably doesn't like, it doesn't bug you out too much at this point. But just wait another like 6 or 7 years, and you're gonna be like, ooh, you know what I mean? And like that was the way that for a long time was like that I looked at the band. It's like I'd look at like old photos or videos or like, even recordings or like that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, you get older, and you change. But now, like we're at this point where it's just, I'm grateful to be able to still have a career in music, and I like, I can laugh at that shit now. It's funny to me, um, and fun. So I don't know. I know I didn't answer your question at all. I'm still trying to think of like the best thing that we've done, but it's is a lot of ups and downs. But to be honest with you, like where we're at with it right now is kind of the best, because we're having fun. We're actually working on some new music, which feels like really like, not because like, oh, some label wants us to do this and that or the other thing. It's like we're just like doing the shit we want to do. We're doing it on our own independently. And so I'm having more fun probably right now with it than I ever had, because I don't have that pressure and the,
Yeah.
A&R guys and the blah, blah, blah. It's like, we just go out and have some fun. We can pay the rent and, whatever. So at this point, I've gotten to a full gratitude phase of the whole thing. If I think of one specific thing, I'll come back to it.
All right. Let's see here. What's your favorite song that you guys have written or done?
I think, I mean, I don't know. We put out a record in 2012, and that record was by far not my favorite record. Like there's certain things about it that I like, and other things that I don't. But there was a song on there called Curtain, that I really like. It's fun to play live, and I like the lyrics and shit like that. So that's kind of been it for me for the last couple years, that song. But like I said, we've got like a new little crop. You're always more excited about your newest shit, So we've got some new songs that we've been working on, and I'm pretty pumped on those. So.
All right. Okay. So who are some of your favorite newer bands of the last 10 years or so?
Let's see. I'd say probably one of my favorite bands is Spoon. You listen to Spoon?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, they're from Austin, Texas. They're kind of like I don't know, sort of like indie, but also sort of I don't know, just good songwriting. Like they put out so many incredible records. Like that's one of my favorite bands of the past decade. I like some of the sort of newer crop of like punk bands like Fiddler. I think Fiddler's fucking awesome. I went to see them a couple years ago, and it was just like I felt like I was 16 again. It was like kids like jumping off the stage and just pure fuckery, and so I really like that band. I'm trying to think of who else. Like I say, if I had to choose one from the past 10 years, it'd probably be Spoon. But I like a ton of shit. I like, I don't know, to me, rock music in general is like, I think one of the reasons why I like the Fiddlers and like those kind of bands is like, it's nice to just hear like bands with guitars and like, like rock bands again. Like to me, like alternative music and indie music and stuff like that has just gotten so overproduced and sort of, I don't know, middle of the road. So like honestly, like last couple of years, like I honestly listen to more hip hop than I listen to like rock music, like fucking like, like J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, like all that kind of stuff. I love like Anderson .Paak. I love, I don't know, that stuff just kind of inspires me more these days than like some like alternative band that's like writing lyrics about nothing and with like 1,000 tracks and like just totally overproduced. So I don't know.
Okay, I was last question I have here is what are your thoughts on the current state of rock music?
Well, I kind of already answered that. I mean, I feel like rock music is it's always cyclical, you know, like it always comes back around. I remember actually when our first record, when we were like about to record our first record, we played all the songs for like our A&R guy at the time, and he was like these songs are really good, but like I just don't know where this is gonna fit in right now because we were like drums, bass, guitar, like
Mhm.
rock band, kind of punk, kind of rock, alternative, whatever
Yeah.
band. And at that time, alternative radio was, which ruled everything, was like it was like Chemical Brothers and uh, uh, I don't know, Moby, or it was like all
Yeah.
these like sort of electronic artists. Like there was like no rock music on the
Hmm.
radio, and we were just like, well, this is what we do, and so this is what we're gonna do, and we did it, and Inside Out came out, and then it was like by the time our next record came out, which was in 2000, then and we had gone sort of more in a like a pop direction.
Hmm.
um, then all of a sudden it was Papa Roach and Limp
Limp
Bizkit
Bizkit, yeah.
and yeah, System of a Down, which I love those dudes. But all these like, it's just like it was like heavy.
Yes,
And so
yeah.
now, so we went from this place of like, oh, you're too rock for the radio, to like, actually, you're kind of too light for the radio. Like within a matter of 2 years. So,
Yeah.
um, so I think that you know, I guess just point being, it always comes back around. There's the cool thing about the era that we're in now is you can find anything now. It's not just what the radio tells you
Yeah.
to listen to, or just what MTV plays, or whatever. So I think there's a lot of these really interesting little genres and subgenres and like all that going on. But on a mainstream level, I don't really know, except
Yeah.
for I feel that people are kind of at that point where they're like, I want to hear a fucking band. Like I want to hear like where it's like it sounds like a drummer and a bass player and a guitar player
Yeah.
playing together, not this like overproduced like fucking hundreds of synths and loops and like
Yeah.
everything auto tuned and all that. It's like I feel like people are sort of thirsting for like sort of uh, just
Hmm.
like rock band, guitar bass drums rock bands again. So I don't know what that will look like. Like there's not really a radio format for it anymore, but
Yeah, because like a lot of the like mainstream rock stations, they mostly still play songs from like 15, 20 years ago all the time. It's like the
yeah,
station here in Oklahoma City, like I'll listen to it for maybe like a week, a couple hours every day or so, and I'll hear The Red by Chevelle probably like 5 or 10 times, or I'll
yep,
hear an old Godsmack song from 2001 several times, and I'm just like there's something else new, I hope. Like, no?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
alternative radio has basically become my generation's classic rock radio. It's like it's like the equivalent of like when I was in high school, like getting into like listening to Led Zeppelin and
Hmm.
Jimi Hendrix and shit like that. Like that's the equivalent now. It's like
Yes.
20 years to Green Day and Chevelle and Sublime and
Yeah.
Oscar and
Because
shit like
when
that. Like
because someone younger than me, someone who's like in high school, they're like 16. I'm 20. I just turned 22, but this kid was 16, and last year he told me that he doesn't listen to any newer metal bands. He only listens to older metal bands. And I was like, oh, like who? And then he was like, Breaking Benjamin, Chevelle, Deftones, Slipknot. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa! You said you don't listen to any newer bands. He's like, I know. I was like, but those. And then I thought about it. I was like, I guess that is kind of older bands.
yeah,
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, 15, 20 years at this point,
Yeah.
in a lot of cases. So, um, yeah, and I I kind of feel like alternative radio blew it in that way. I mean, I'm glad because Inside Out still gets played in that rotation, and
all the time.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the fucking time. So I'm not complaining about that, but I think that alternative radio sort of made a mistake by not continuing to evolve with the music. It's like now they're in this place where they did what every other company in this country does, which was just try to maximize their profits. So they were basing shit off of like, oh, this works in our test result research. Like, back in the day, you had people that were like taking a risk, like being like, oh, I know all these hair metal bands are really like popular right now, but Nirvana's the shit, and like taking a chance on that, on just some really left stuff, compared to what was going on. Yeah. And like, I feel like that just, the labels stopped doing that. The radio stations stopped doing that. They all just went for the like, oh, our, research shows that people want to hear, this kind of pop music with the, and I think that it's just, that we haven't had anyone in a while who's like really willing to like take a risk, so hopefully that comes around, but I really don't know what to say. I know people will always love rock music and it'll always come back around, but I mean, at this point, it's not in a incredible place, at least in a mainstream way,
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. This has been great. Do you have anything you want to plug? Like, where can we find you on social media and whatnot?
And pretty much anywhere at Eve 6. Max has been on this new trip of just insane tweets lately from the Eve 6 account. So if you want to have yourself a little laugh, go check that out. Eve6.com. We're doing a 20th anniversary tour of the second record, Horoscope, this year with Alien Ant Farm.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and then this band Potty Mouth, like an all-female kind of like punk power pop band. They're super awesome. So we're doing that. Starts at the end of April and goes all the way through May. Unfortunately, I don't think there's an Oklahoma City in there. So we're doing that. We have like a live record that we're putting out. It's coming out on Record Store Day on April 18th. We're doing vinyl of it, and that's coming out. And then, like I say, nothing's been announced or finalized yet, but we are gonna have some new music coming as well, probably later in the year. So.
All right. It's nice talking to you. Thanks.
Right on. Nice talking to you too, man. Thanks for having me on. And I've been loving following all your stuff on Twitter, and I think I found you through because I follow Aiden Smith. And,
yeah.
Yeah, and so he like retweeted you, and then I followed you, and then started like looking at some of your stuff, and I watched like the interview you did with him and stuff like that. So I was like, this is awesome. I love this vibe. So I was stoked when you asked me to come on. So.
All right.
Keep it up, man.
I will. Thanks.